Hello, and welcome to a special bonus episode of Backlog Brain Rot. Joining me today is my fellow co-host Straw Hat,
Konnichiwa, Minasan.
and today we have subbed Connor out because he doesn't really know much about this topic, and we have a special guest with us. He is one of the only sports gamers in the Discord other than myself, and that is Raynik.
Good evening, or whatever time this finds you.
So, in celebration of the Super Bowl, which is right around the corner from us as we record this, also in celebration of LeBron getting the scoring record and Kyrie Irving finally getting traded for my favorite team, I figured this would be a fun idea to do a little mini episode about sports games. I know that a lot of people don't really find sports games fun. They don't like to spend like hundreds of hours playing NBA 2K like Raynik and I do. So I figured to make this more fun for everybody, we would just list off our 5 favorite arcadey sports games. So that eliminates boring simulation games like Madden or NBA 2K, and instead it allows us to have discussions about more fun games that everybody has probably played. A few notes on the list before we start. We each came up with our own top 5s, with our first place being worth 5 points and our 5th place being worth 1 point. And I've combined those to make one joint top 5 list. I also have combined entries in a series. It's more like our top 5 favorite arcade sports series. The only other rule is that we decided to avoid Mario sports games because those are kind of their own topic for that we will get to some other day.
Yes, I would have made the list way more stressful because I was like, then you'd have to consider Mario Kart, which is like its own series, and it's like, we better just keep those separate.
Yeah, I think personally I probably would have just had 5 Mario sports games, and I was like, well, okay, that's not very exciting.
Yeah.
So we'll do that another day because we could probably spend, could probably have a whole episode just about Mario Kart alone. So to start, we will go with our 5th entry, and that is something that was on both Raynik and Straw Hat's list, and that is just broadly Punch-Out.
Ooh.
I'm going to pass it to Raynik first because he had the original Punch-Out on his list.
Okay, yeah, Punch-Out. It was a game that I first played at probably one of my best friends growing up house. He had the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. He also had his NES a couple years before I got one myself. So when I did finally get an NES in, 1989, I guess. The next year or so, I got the Mr. Dream Punch-Out version. That because NES or Nintendo didn't want to pay the rights for Mike Tyson's name anymore or whatever, so they basically just color swapped them like a ROM hack essentially, and then you had Mr. Dream instead. So that was the version that I played and loved, I guess, growing up. Many classic enemies or fighters, I guess, that Mac had to face. The venerable Soda Popinski.
Yes.
King Hippo. There was Don Flamenco. He was always frustrating for me, particularly.
Did you ever finish it? Did you ever beat Mike Tyson, or what is it, Mr. Dream?
Yeah, Mr. Dream. The first one or whatever, the world tour, I guess, is what it ended with. Yeah, I want to say me and my friend like combined and stayed up multiple weekend, nights or whatever at sleepovers or whatever. And we definitely beat him. We would alternate the circuits. He would play a circuit, I'd play a circuit. We'd die or whatever, start over the circuit, alternate. So yeah, we both probably beat him, I don't know, a few times, I would say. But definitely a frustrating game.
So for Punch-Out, Raynik had the very first Punch-Out at number 4 on his list, and Straw Hat had Super Punch-Out at number 3 on his list.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about Super Punch-Out now. So yeah, that's the one on Super Nintendo, and it's usually the one that gets I don't think people like that one as much. Like the original Punch-Out that Raynik likes is really popular, and people even really like the Wii one, which I actually never played. But Super Punch-Out, that was the one I got growing up. I remember, I think it was at Toys R Us getting it because it was buy 2 for $30 at the time. I think I got that and Scooby-Doo Mysteries Incorporated because I love the Scooby-Doo games. but it was just a random purchase. But my cousin Nick and I loved it. Like, we played it so much. In fact, my original copy, he kept himself and then sold it. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I guess I owe you some money because I sold your game." I'm like, "Thanks a lot." Like, he never gave it back to me after he borrowed it. But it was pretty tough. Like, it had a bunch of, they don't like the biggest, they swapped out a lot of the characters. Like, they had Mr. Sandman, Rick and Nick Bruiser were the twins that you fought at the end that were tough. But I remember as a kid, I don't know if I ever beat it because it's really hard. I did beat it later on, and I usually play it. I don't know if I play it once a year now, but it takes usually like a couple hours to beat it. But it's just really fun. I like how the super meter you can build up, and yeah, it's just a great game, I think.
Is it a lot different than the original, or just a slightly more improved version,
Uh,
gameplay wise?
I think it's, I mean, it's the same pretty much style. The biggest difference I'd say is the perspective. Like, it's almost more like behind the back for you, where this one, where the other one, it was more zoomed out, wouldn't you say, Raynik?
I never had a Super Nintendo growing up, so that is a blind spot for me. I don't think I ever played Super Punch Out per se.
I think if it's, well, if you have a Switch, I think it is on the online. I'm not positive, but I know it's on the SNES Classic, but I'm not sure. I think it is on there.
I feel like that is
Nice.
maybe the only way I could play that, because I definitely I played the original Punch Out on an actual NES that I used to have with my stepdad, and I not like we played it obsessively, but we played it quite a bit, and I don't think I could ever beat that. I don't think I have the patience to get to the
Yeah,
end.
it's hard. They're hard games.
And then once you die or once you lose, don't you have to start over? Like, you don't just start where you were.
Right. You have to start each circuit over.
Yep.
Like on your way to being the world champion or whatever. Yep.
And I know in Super Punch Out, you have to not get any losses on the circuit to unlock the last circuit that has like the final four fighters.
Oh my, yeah. I think, yeah, maybe some emulations the way I'll check out Punch Out,
That's,
more in
yeah,
depth.
that's the way to do it now. So
The rewind button on the Switch Online would be key for that one.
that's very true.
Yeah, I remember I played the Mega Man ports and I abused that rewind for sure. Those old games are just, you know, they're doable if you want to really sink your time into them to learn, but I'm not sure I want to commit to that, but I'm definitely going to check out some of the Punch Out games. So number 4 on our joint list is the NFL Street series. Straw Hat had NFL Street Volume 2 at number 2 on his list, and I also had NFL Street Volume 2 at number 3 on my list.
All right. Yeah, I played the first NFL Street Volume 1 as well, but I never played Volume 3. But Volume 2 I just loved so much. Like, it had good single player that you had too, but cuz you basically like have to start from the bottom, go to the top and so on. But my friend and I in high school stayed up all night playing it pretty much. We didn't go to bed that night. We stayed up and played that, but I just played it all the time. I remember Jeremy Shockey's on the cover, which is a great throwback, but I just always remember doing the wall kick move.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
you just can run up, or you can either run up the wall or you can just kick off of it really quick. And you can like make catches off of it too. But it's just so fun to play in the arcade, or the arcadiness of it. But yeah, I want to actually play it again. I have it on my list to play, but I've spent so much time playing that game.
Yeah, growing up, my brother and I had both the first one and the second one. I also never played the third one. And I remember the second one is where it introduced all the wall stuff, so
Yep.
that's why that one is a little bit more. That's the one I prefer. But I remember we would just play it, both of them, all the time, because what was fun about that was like the versus mode. You took turns picking players from all the different teams,
Yep.
so you could have just like crazy teams. And I just remember we would always play in the first one. There was a beach level, and we would just play on that level over and over and over again.
I also remember the game breakers. Like, you'd always want to do it on defense because you would, whenever you get a sack, you'd always get a turnover. And just be like, I'm coming, here I come.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing, because I just remember, like, on offense they were cool, but I just felt like in that game you could pretty much score at will anyways.
Yep.
So you'd always just use it on defense to force some sort of turnover, because the computers also in that game are like brutally hard to play
I
against.
know. I know. I'm excited to play it again.
Yeah, and then when I was in probably in college, on a summer break, one of my good friends and I grabbed the PS2 and we plugged the game back in and we worked our way through the entire campaign of both NFL Street 1 and 2 in co-op mode, which was very fun. And we named I think in that one, at least in the first one, I remember you had to create your own players, or you could.
Yep.
So we just named them after all of our friends. So we had like horrible stats, and then we had to work our way up and slowly be able to win. And like the computers were so hard. Some of the times we were just like sweating trying to win the game, like 55-50 or something, just
Oof,
don't have any hope of progressing.
so good.
Raynik, have you played any of those?
So yeah, I played them. Probably at least one of the NFL Street ones, probably the first and probably the second one. Back then, it was probably on the Xbox or something like that. Probably a couple years after they came out. I do remember those ones, the NFL Blitz ones.
Hmm.
Like
Yep.
Midway kind of started those in the arcade machines and stuff, and
Yep.
those were always, definitely fun.
It's so funny that I think we all three played them on different consoles then, because I played all mine on GameCube, because it was GameCube, PS2, and Xbox.
I was a GameCube kid, but we owned a PS2, which was mostly my brother's. And at this point in my life, my brother was and still is a huge sports person. But at that point in my life, I was not into sports at all. So the PS2 was mostly his. So he only owned sports games. And I never cared to play any like simulation game, but I would play, the streets. And a shout out to MLB Slugfest. We played that a lot
Yes,
too.
that was one I almost put on my list too.
Since we're here, an honorable mention quickly would be NFL Blitz because Straw, you had that at 4 on your list, but neither Raynick or I had it.
Yeah, I had 2002, I think it was specifically. I think Charles Woodson was on the cover, I remember, but that was the one that my cousin and I played all the time, and it was on GameCube. But I do remember even the original Dreamcast and N64 one, because Cordell Stewart was like on the cover or something. But yeah, they are similar to. I think it's a little more. I couldn't tell you the difference now. Really, I almost feel like it's more arcadey. The Blitz games are than the Street, but I'll have to play them and compare them. But I did love both of them.
At least the NFL Blitz I played was more arcadey, and just in that it was definitely more simple to play. I remember I played the PS3 one. I'm not sure what that one was called though.
Yeah, that it was probably after that one. But I think in NFL Blitz you could like actually just like tackle people before you even like they do anything. Where
Yeah.
and in the street games, I don't think you can do that. I think you have to wait for them to actually catch the ball and stuff.
Yeah, I think the street games were maybe a little more like real football, at least in the rules.
Yeah.
So our number 3 is a very, very broad, huge franchise, and that is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, or any Tony Hawk game. Raynick had Tony Hawk as his second game. He had Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 specifically as his second game, and I just broadly put Tony Hawk's Pro Skater also as my second game. So, Raynick, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. I you know, I don't know what else you can say about this game other than it's simply one of the classics, one of the best. Really, I think I first had it on the PS1. I think I got it again on the Dreamcast. Maybe there was a port there, and then by time Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 came out, I had that on a couple different consoles or PC. Even there was a Windows port of that, shockingly. But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, it was a probably one of the best sequels. I would say of sports games. Just the improvements from the first one, adding I think the manual was a big addition on that one. I think if I remember that right. The soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack is key to any Tony Hawk game. But that had some bangers on it. Kind of introduced me to Bad Religion, and so I kind of went down that rabbit hole, getting into that band a little bit back then.
So you played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 before you ever played 2?
Yeah, yeah. I had the first one on PS1 as well. That was probably, I don't know, 1997 or something. I'm guessing is 98 maybe.
The first one I played was I have a vague memory of trying Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 at my uncle's house, because my uncle's who got me into video games. He always had he had all the consoles, always had all sorts of new games. So I remember trying it there, but the first one I really played was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 on PS2 that my brother had, and I remember just like I'm pretty sure in that one you had like all the different random characters you could be, and I remember us playing that very obsessively. I don't remember what came out next, but we also had Tony Hawk's Underground 1 and 2, and I remember playing like absolutely obsessively playing that, especially Tony Hawk's Underground 2, which I'm not really sure is actually a good Tony Hawk game, but I remember I had it on my PSP, so I just played it all the time.
Nice. Yeah, Underground, man. I'll still listen to that soundtrack sometimes, like on Spotify or whatever streaming. I really like that one too.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my music taste comes from, playing a lot of Tony Hawk, at that certain age. Even past that, I remember playing Tony Hawk's Project 8 a lot on my 360. One of my good friends and I both had it. I feel like at that time there were not a ton of 360 games out yet. So he and I would just go online and just play it like obsessively. And that was the one where you could go into slow mo, do really crazy tricks. And then playing American Wasteland on 362, which was like just like Project 8, it was a more open world, quote unquote Tony Hawk game, which basically just was a lot of levels stitched together with long loading hallways. Stry, have you played any of these?
Yeah, so I can't. My cousin had them on PS1, I remember. So I don't remember which one it was, but I actually did own one of them. I owned Pro Skater 2 on Game Boy Color, right? So I did play that.
Oh man.
Obviously, it wasn't as good as the ones you guys played, but it was still fun. But yeah, it definitely was not on that level.
Is that like one of the only ones you played then?
I think so. Like I said, I did play one on or on PlayStation 1. I was probably the first one, and I liked it, but I wasn't a really big skateboarding fan, so I never really got into them.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I don't think I really ever skateboarded a day in my life, up until playing, the Tony Hawk game. So it definitely worked in that regard, just to market the sport or whatever you want to consider it.
Did you start? So you started skateboarding after that?
I mean, yeah, I tried very, very unsuccessfully, I might
Yeah,
add.
skateboarding and trying to skateboard, two different things.
Yeah, I would never say I actually skateboarded.
I definitely wanted to learn to skateboard after playing those games so obsessively, but I never actually did. And I just feel like if I did, I would have, been in the same boat. Would have been trying, but I don't think I would have. I don't think there's any reality where I would have been good at it.
Did you play the 1 and 2 remaster at all? The recent re-releases or remakes?
I loved playing that.
Yeah, that was such a fun nostalgia trip. Just seeing all the levels kind of redone and brought to modern standards, or it felt really great too. I had to play that one with a PlayStation controller because that's what I was mostly used to.
All the muscle memory.
Yeah, with the shoulder buttons. I couldn't do it on a 360 pad or a Xbox One pad or whatever.
Yeah, it was kind of fun because I played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but I never even played the first one, so a lot of it was pretty new to me. I mean, I think a lot of those levels had been remade like over the years, like here and there in the other games, but so it was kind of like the first time seeing some of that stuff. The only levels I did not really like are the ones where you're going downhill the whole time. I just sucked at those so badly.
Oh yeah. Those are weird for sure. Kind of like a Sonic type level almost.
Yeah, you're just like constantly going downhill. And I remember one of them, I was playing online with Alexis, and I was just like falling over and over and over again. Have you ever played Skate? None of us put that on our list.
Not really. I mean, I have it on backwards compat on the Xbox Series. I've installed it, played around with it. I think it was on Game Pass or whatever, but I never really actually got into it and played it and beat it or anything like that.
Yeah, I tried it recently, and I think that if I really dove into it, maybe I would grow to like it. But it's hard to go to that from only playing Tony Hawk for like 2 decades. It's definitely a whole lot different.
Yeah, that was pretty much my experiences. I fell off it quick.
Yeah, maybe Straw Hat will upgrade from the Game Boy version and he can play the Tony Hawk's American Skateland DS game, which I also remember playing, a nice cell shaded portable Tony Hawk game.
I'll have to, how was it? Did you have to use touch screen controls?
I think you could like save your favorite moves to the touchscreen, or maybe that's how you did your special moves. So you just like, instead of doing any combos, you just press the button. But it's been so long since I played that.
Maybe they'll bring the Game Boy Advance version of Tony Hawk to the Switch Online.
That would be perfect. They'd get all sorts of subscriptions just because of that, I bet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would definitely be a system seller for sure, or a subscription seller.
Yeah, both.
Probably both. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So number 2 is not surprising at all, in my opinion. I didn't mention it, but there's no game on here that all three of us put, but this was one I almost put towards the bottom of mine, but I don't have a lot of experience with it, and that's NBA Street, which Draw had as his number 1, and Raynik, you had it as your number 3. You both put NBA Street Volume 2.
All right, yeah, Street Volume 2. If the GameCube kept track of hours, that would have been probably my most played game because, well, maybe not over Melee, but next to that one. But I would go over to my cousin's house every Saturday and we would play NBA Street Volume 2 every weekend. It was so good. The single player was really good too. I still remember some of the players that you would unlock because you kind of did the same thing as NFL Street. You like create your player and you have to work your way up through the teams. And they had like street legends. And I remember there was a couple of them. There was like Biggie Little. He was like this 14-year-old kid, pretty much like Mike. And he would do like this dribble with his feet. He'd be like, in your face, in your face. And then there was, I think his name was Whitewater or something. He could shoot from half court. Like he just would throw it behind his back and it'd go in every time. Like the characters were just so crazy. It was hilarious. And yeah, the gameplay was just so fun. And I did play Volume 3, which is also good, but I still liked Volume 2 better.
Yeah, I played a little bit of NBA Street Volume 2 at a friend's house, but I don't have a whole lot of experience with it other than I remember as a kid I really wanted to buy NBA Street Volume 3 on my GameCube just so I could play as Mario, Luigi, and Peach.
That was so weird.
I didn't even like basketball at the time, but I was so like I really wanted my mom to buy it for me, even though I probably wouldn't have even cared, but I just wanted to play as Luigi.
So funny. I think the Beastie Boys they were in Volume 2 or 3. Do you remember, Raynik? I don't remember which one.
Yeah, probably 3.
I think it was 3.
Yeah, I don't really recall them being in 2, but could be wrong.
Raynik, what is your experience with NBA Street?
NBA Street, yeah, that was always really fun to play against. At that time, I was playing pretty much with coworkers, buddies after work kind of deal, drinking on the weekend, staying up playing stupid sports games against each other. So there was many Friday and Saturday evenings spent trash talking and playing street ball, NBA Street against each other. Like Straw Hat was saying, the single player was shockingly, there was like it was pretty fun gameplay loop to, unlock your characters and all that levels. It kind of a little bit like the other EA big series, essentially. I was like that era, Street 2, because the Pistons were actually good in the basketball game.
Is that the last game they were good in?
Arguably, probably. But yeah, they were always fun to actually be able to play as the Pistons and beat people that were being like, I think Jordan was in that game and some other people. Like the Lakers, people would be like the Lakers or, the Jordan. And then, you could just beat them with the Pistons. So that was always fun. The Pacers were fun to play as. I think I remember like Scott, what's his face? Reggie Miller was like OP a little bit. But yeah, those were always fun type of competitive, type matches.
Who do you think would win, Reggie Miller or Luigi, if Reggie Miller was in NBA Street Volume 3?
Yeah, probably Luigi.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say I'll answer for that's Luigi for sure.
I don't even know if it'd be a contest, to be honest.
What was the gameplay? What was the difference in NBA Street compared to a normal basketball game, like gameplay wise?
It was a lot like NBA Jam, if you remember that, which I also like that series a lot too.
Yes. Well, that'll be coming up in a moment.
It was NBA Jam, but in 3D, it cranked up to like 11, essentially.
I remember you could do moves, right? Like a bunch of dribble moves. You got points for doing combos and things like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you knock people over with your moves and stuff. It was only 2-on-2, which also was NBA Jam, which it sounds like we'll talk about later because I was going to ask another question about that.
Yeah,
But
we will get to that. All right. So before we get to number one, which I'm sure you can guess what it is, we'll quickly go through our honorable mentions. So these are the games that one of us wrote on our lists, pretty much just our, our fifth and fourth choices for the most part that didn't end up making the list. We'll start with Straw Hat. You wrote Ready to Rumble, which is a game I've never even heard of.
yeah, so this game came out on N64 and Sega Dreamcast. I don't know if it came to PlayStation 1. It probably did, but it's a boxing game and it is a lot. It's similar to Punch Out and it has like the zany characters, but it's 3D, fully 3D. And I actually played it a little bit today because I knew we were going to talk about it because I'm like, it's another game where I remember my cousin and I playing it all the time. But I booted it up and it's pretty hilarious to play. Like you have a stamina meter that almost always runs out all the time. So you just have to dodge punches all the time. And you're just like it doesn't even feel like boxing because you're just like running up and throwing an uppercut and then running back until your stamina comes back. But and then also like as you're punching and stuff, you start getting the letters for rumble. And whenever you get the full word, you can hit a button and then you get the rumble power up and then you just like your gloves start glowing and you can start punching without any stamina worry. So it's funny, but definitely better as a multiplayer game than a single player game.
I'm gonna have to look into that because I'm looking at pictures and it just seems pretty crazy.
Yeah, that game that was a lot of fun. I remember having that on the Dreamcast because I had a Dreamcast at one point, and you could just burn every game. So
Yeah.
literally had a spindle of like the entire catalog. And yeah, Ready to Rumble was a good like another one of those midway like sports over the top. But yeah, it wasn't really boxing, but it was still fun.
Yeah. We need Midway and all of them to come back again because I miss these games.
You can tell from the list that this is a sort of genre that hardly exists nowadays because almost nothing on this list is even close to modern.
No.
But
Yeah.
one modern game that is one of my honorable mentions is a reboot of an old game that Raynik wrote on his list of honorable mentions, and that is the reboot of Mutant Football League. I I bought this game on a whim. I didn't even know that it was like a reboot of an older game, and I bought it on my Switch, and I've probably played like 50 hours of this game over the last few years. For whatever reason, every few months I just get obsessed with it and I will just pick it up and I'll end up playing through an entire season in like 2 days. It's just an arcadey football game, but you play as aliens and monsters and skeletons and that sort of thing. And the gameplay hook is that killing the other players on the other team and protecting your players from getting killed is all part of the strategy. So every half you get two special plays on offense and two special plays on defense called dirty tricks, which could be anything from lighting your own guy on fire to therefore light all the other defenders on fire, or throwing a football that turns into a razor blade and cutting and killing the opposing defense, or sacking the quarterback before he snaps the ball to kill him. And then there's also a button where you can punch people. So once you deliver the tackle, you can just kick the people while they're down to try to kill their star players so so their team gets worse as the game goes. And there's spike pits and chainsaws and all sorts of crazy things.
Nice. Yeah, that does sound very similar to the old Genesis game I think I put on my kind of honorable mention list. That was yeah, very similar. Like monsters, demons, skeleton guys. That one was very primitive probably compared to the remake or reboot, I'm guessing by modern standards, but it was essentially at the time it was basically just Madden but cloned, and so it had all the Madden type plays, so there were real quote unquote real football players that had your passing would have like 3 options, just like the Madden games of the time, and it would kind of like pop up on these like little windows. I just remember the like each face button was mapped to one of these little windows, so you could throw it to whoever was open or whatever. But yeah, same thing. Spike traps, holes in the field, weapons and stuff. Explosive explosive balls and crap like that. Yeah, a lot of fun. I remember renting that one constantly. I don't think I ever owned it, but like for an entire summer, I think I rented it probably every other weekend.
Yeah, the new one is something about it is just very addicting, and it's just like other sports games, you can like the main like the campaign where you start with bad players and you have to slowly build your team to be good. And it got to the point where my defense was so good, like we were averaging more defensive touchdown points than every other team in the league was scoring on offense. So it's just like a crazy game.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think there's that much depth to it. I mean, it's basically just like you know, like an old Madden clone, but it was fun at the time. I'm sure it still probably holds up kind of well for you know, early '90s console port type thing. But I remember the jump button. There was like a jump button you had, and you would just go flying all over the field with it. There was not much control to it. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it would not really, and you'd lose like 15 yards on it.
Trying to jump.
It was kind of a gamble, but it was a fun game for sure.
I never heard of this before, but I added it to my wish list. So
It was hard. I do remember that the AI, like I would just cheat. I would just be like the best team, or I think they were like the Galaxy something.
In the new one, they're all the player names and teams are just puns based off of real people.
Yeah, that was the case back then as well. Like one of the main coaches you would go up against was clearly just Mike Ditka, but as a like pig face mutant.
Yeah.
I also saw they had was it the Patriots, which I'm like, I would never play as them.
The Jets aren't in the game, so I play as the Crack Some Skulls Jaguars or Crack Some Skulls Jugulars, I think is what that is. But yeah, I'd love to play with you sometime. It's what's funny is it is somewhat popular because they are making a second one, but you'll be playing it and it's unpopular enough that like if you're even playing the game in the top left, if someone actually goes online is looking for a match, it pops up as like someone wants to play online. So 4 of Raynik's games made our top 5, but you had one honorable mention that didn't, and that was Wii Sports. If you want to talk about it,
Ah, yes, the venerable sports game that everybody has played, including my parents and grandparents at the time. That was essentially why it made my cut or made my list. It was just a fun, casual game you could play with your relatives. So I have some, fond memories playing Wii Sports like around that Christmas, whenever that came out, and I got a Wii. It might have been 2006. It might have been the following year. I don't exactly remember, but yeah, playing that with like my grandma and my parents and stuff. That was just a really good time.
yeah, I agree. I have a very similar experience with that game. I remember playing with my whole family, and I have little cousins now that still play it to this day in 2023. I go over there for holidays and they bust out. They're like, "Oh, come over, come play," and then we play Wii bowling for like hours on end.
Nice. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Wii Sports. I know when Raynik told me, like, oh yeah, that was a good pick. But yeah, I loved. We played it a lot too. That's probably like the newest sports game on the list, actually. Well, other than the one we just talked about, yeah. But yeah, that was a great one because yeah, everybody played it. Also, shout out because Addie loves this game, so make sure and talk to Addie about Wii Sports.
One of the greatest launch games of all time, one of the most influential, at
Yeah.
least. The Wii probably would not have been as successful as it was without the Wii Sports. You have to imagine.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. And we would have never gotten the venerable PS3 classic Sports Champions.
You know what? Shockingly, that didn't make any of our lists or the large list of honorable mentions I was given. I can't
Shocked.
believe it.
Shocked.
So the last honorable mention was my 5th place game. And I'll just quickly shout out WWF No Mercy on Nintendo 64.
Mm.
I used to play this with my brother all the time, and maybe it was supposed to be realistic at the time, but I don't really think that you would ever call this a simulation game. But it just had the WWF at the time when it was WWF. It just had the full roster, and you pretty much what we would do is we would just grab items from under the ring and beat the crap out of each other. You could go behind the stage and explore the backstage and fight each other back there, and it was just always a good time. Did either of you play that or any other like wrestling games like that?
I played one on Super Nintendo, the one that first featured Jake the Snake. I don't remember which one that was, but my cousin had that one and we played it all the time. But I looked up reviews of it and apparently it was terrible, but we didn't remember it at the time. So,
Yeah, I played a couple of the Nintendo 64 ones. I don't remember any of their names. There was like a WWE one maybe with like the NWO guys on it, maybe or something like that. I remember playing a few of those. The wrestling game that I really liked growing up was the NES one. I think it was either just pro wrestling, I want to call it, maybe, or fire pro wrestling or something. I think it was just pro wrestling or wrestling. I don't know, but there was like a star faced guy. I just remember that, but that was my very limited wrestling game experience.
I feel like they're just fun games to just go around and mess around with. I'm not at that time because WWF No Mercy was one of the N64 ones, but at the time I was like into wrestling because my mom was into it. But pretty much we just like to mess around in the game and hit each other with steel chairs and jump off onto the tables and things like that.
Yeah, those were some fun games on the Nintendo 64.
All right, so as previously teased, our number one game with first place from Raynik and myself is broadly NBA Jam.
that's funny because it almost made my list at number 5, so it was close.
I feel like this is just like the quintessential arcadey sports game. It's the game that if you go out somewhere and you're like at a bar or some sort of arcade, they always, if they have machines, NBA Jam is typically one of them. I just feel like it's like the perfect arcadey sports game for 2 to 4 players, and you just go around. It's very basic. You just you jump to block and then you just shoot and pass, and that's really all it is. If you play alone, you only play as one person, so it's about as simple as it can get. So like pretty much anybody can play it, and then just like the very simple hook of just shooting and dunking, and then if you score 3 in a row, you get on fire. So then just
Yeah.
you can make pretty much anything. It definitely just creates a very addicting but simple gameplay loop.
Yeah, NBA Jam blew my mind when it came out, and it was in the arcade, and got a home console port on the Genesis at the time, and it was just a classic. Um, Another game where the Pistons were actually good, so that was always fun too. They had Isaiah Thomas and Bill Laimbeer.
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah, if the Pistons are good, I might actually play the game. But no, I mean Dick Vitale, I think, was the announcer guy. The Boom Shakalaka, maybe it wasn't him, but it always reminded me of him. Actually, it probably wasn't him.
It's a very iconic part of the game, that announcing.
Yeah, that was, uh, you know, he's heating up. Rejected. Is it the shoes?
No,
How
it's
many
just
times
me.
did you hear, is it the shoes in a single game, you know?
It's funny because the NBA Jam I actually played the most was 2000 with Chris Webber on the cover on N64. It had like a red cartridge, and that was the one I played so much.
Oh, man. I had the unfortunate pleasure or displeasure of playing the Saturn version of NBA Jam, and after that, it kind of soured me on the entire series for probably 20 years. I don't think I've played it since.
What was so bad about it?
Oh, it was, it was, oh man, it physically abused and hurt my eyes as back in the mid '90s on the Sega Saturn.
Which NBA Jam did you play the most? Parrot the original or?
So, like I said, I wasn't really into sports very much growing up. I played a lot of these games with my brother, but we never had sort of any NBA Jam. So, when on my PS3, I remember NBA Jam, I think it's like NBA Jam on Fire Edition, got added to PS Plus. So, that was like really the first NBA Jam I like really played a lot. I remember like going through multiple seasons of it with my roommate, so we could play the co-op. So instead of playing, you each plays one of the two people.
Yeah.
And we were, at the time I was just fresh into basketball, so we played as the Nets, and I'm pretty sure I was the wonderful Darren Williams, and he was Paul Pierce. And we, work our way through all the seasons. And then there was a, cover your ears, a lot of you, but there was a mobile port of NBA Jam on Fire Edition that still would get the rosters updated for like years and years afterwards. So I would also play that a lot, like, at work, when I was, a little bored, I would bust out the NBA Jam machine and play on my phone.
I also played that port on my iPad, so I can't say anything.
It worked. It was very, a game that simple, it can pretty much work anywhere. You only
Yeah.
like two buttons and moving. But yeah, so that is the number one on our list, which I think, checks out. I think that is the most pick up and play, easy, but yeah, addicting arcadey sports game that I think exists.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, I almost if I wanted to give Ready to Rumble a shout out. Otherwise, I did have NBA Jam on my list before that. So
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Do we have any other quick shout outs we want to do before we go?
I think I'm good. I do remember the Blitz game, like the Blitz the League games, but I didn't really play those too much. But other than that, I can't. I think we pretty much covered all the main ones that I can think of.
One extra I can think of that I played a lot. Weirdly, I played a lot like in the last like 5 years is Backyard Basketball for PS2.
Oh yeah, those were good.
I played a lot of that. My girlfriend does not have much video game experience, but she, whatever reason, owned that game on her parents' PS2. So like when I went over there one day, we started playing it, and now every once in a while we boot it up. I play as old Pete Wheeler and just shoot every shot, and she plays as Kid Yao Ming, who in this reality can hit 95% of his 3-point shots.
Yeah, Backyard Baseball was the one I played a lot of.
I would say I would have to give one extra shout out to basically any clap hands golf game. Everybody's golf, any of the hot shots, any of them. They've always been fun.
Yes, I love the Everybody's Golf game on PS4. That's the only one of that series I've played, but I played a lot of that.
Too bad they killed the servers.
Yeah, it's good to get a golf shot up. The biggest like arcadey golf game I played is Mario Golf, which we didn't want to include, but I do love a good, arcadey golf game.
For sure.
All right. Well, that will wrap up our top 5, which the final tally was NBA Jam 1, NBA Street 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, NFL Street 4, and the Punch-Out series at 5. Raynik, thank you for joining us. Thank you for filling in for Connor. He's not a very big sports guy.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
I'm sure we'll have you on again for some more sports-related topics.
Or when the Nets and Pistons meet in the playoffs coming up.
Yeah.
Yes, coming your way in 2035.
Yeah, I was going to say 2036. So yeah, we're thinking about the same. So that is going to do it for us today. Stay tuned. We have our regularly scheduled episodes coming up. We'll have our next top 10 list coming up the week after this. Top 10 visual novels. So stay tuned for that. Till then, we'll see you later.
Sayonara.
Take care.